If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. So Season 9 of MLP is coming out this year, and it's said to be the last season of the show. We will be getting some EQG stuff along the side, but hearing about the main series ending soon kind of leaves a rather bittersweet taste in my mouth. On one hand, it's pretty sad that one of the biggest and most influential cartoons of the last decade is reaching its conclusion, but on the other hand, it's probably for the best. As we all know, it's not a good idea for a show to keep running longer than it should, because at best it'll become a shadow of its former self, and at worst it'll devolve into a grotesque parody of the original concept. But for a while, there's been a big anomaly regarding Friendship is Magic that's been stuck in the back of my mind, and that just happens to be the 8th season of the show. From what I've been hearing, Season 8 has been regarded as somewhat of a black sheep of the franchise, with people ranking it as just okay to one of the worst seasons of the show. So what exactly is it about Season 8 that makes it so forgettable compared to the rest of the series? I'll admit that for a while I wasn't exactly sure, but after taking some time to think about it, I've narrowed it down to several different reasons. These reasons could range from how the characters were handled to how the stories were presented, and I think the first thing is that it is because it's been 8 seasons, and a lot can actually change within that time, because the writing staff of Season 8 are not the same group of people who worked on the show's first 4 seasons. In fact, some of these writers actually made their debut this season. There are writers carried over from Season 6 and 7, but even then, these aren't the same storytellers who help put the series on the map. From big names like Amy Keating-Rogers and Megan McCarthy to those who were simply part of the team like Dave Polsky and Cindy Morrow, the original writing team are largely just not around anymore. What makes this a problem is that due to the way newer episodes have been written, it feels like these new writers are not familiar with what's come before. Something really similar ended up happening to The Simpsons around Season 7, in which so many of the people who worked on the show during its heyday were starting to move on to other things. And as a result of the loss of this team, The Simpsons progressively lost its spark, with later seasons failing to recapture what made the series what it once was. Taking place of the original writing team are people who seem to only vaguely remember things that happened in earlier seasons, resulting in a number of inconsistencies. And it's something that I was seeing a lot of in Season 8. Due to how several stories were written and how several characters were handled, something just felt very wrong. For example, let's take an episode from Season 1 and an episode from Season 8 that mostly tackled the same concept: Fall Weather Friends and Non-Complete Claws. Fall Weather Friends was an episode that helped introduce a factor of the characters Applejack and Rainbow Dash, their competitive spirit and friendly rivalry. In this episode, they challenge each other in the Falling of the Leaves race, an equestrian event meant to help leaves fall from the trees during the fall. At first they start off pretty level-headed, but after a while the competition gets to their heads and they do whatever it takes to beat each other. Now in terms of the story itself, you could say that it's not anything new. We've seen stories about two friends getting caught up in competition being done in a lot of other shows before now, but because of the energy and diversity these characters offer, it presents a different kind of appeal. Applejack is defined by her sense of responsibility, often acting as a level-headed member of the group and a voice of reason amongst more gimmicky characters, but she's still stubborn and prideful to a fault, usually due to her feelings of being more logical compared to those around her. On the other hand, Rainbow Dash is highly boastful and energetic. She's always trying to push past her limits with a big competitive ego to boot, which gives her the confidence she needs to do cool stuff. But she also feels a need for acknowledgement by her friends and others. Without it, she ends up falling into a strong lack of self-esteem, brought upon by unreceived affirmation for her struggles. She can be overcome with doubt and insecurity because in spite of trying her hardest, she still didn't succeed. This isn't a bad thing though, as both of these characters have pros and cons that perfectly balance each other out, creating archetypes that are really well grounded and relatable. In spite of her stubborn pride, AJ still wishes to respect and help others out, and in spite of her ego, Dash still acknowledges the talents and skills of others and encourages them to push forward. These are characters that both contrast and mirror each other perfectly, making them one of the more interesting pairings in the series. It's a balance created by conflicting personalities that manage to find even ground within each other, and it's a balance that's very well presented in Fall Weather Friends. It uses their competitive rivalry as a window to show how they can still be friends in spite of their conflicting differences. They still have friendly banter while enjoying each other's company, and even during the earlier parts of the episode, they acknowledge each other's feats. It's only when Dash starts using an unfair handicap that AJ starts feeling cheated out of a fair competition. During the race, we see how the two get caught up in a heated rivalry brought upon by friendly competition, and it's actually done pretty modestly. There's a few times where they accuse each other of cheating when it was brought upon by their own ignorance, and the result is them losing focus on the race and becoming obsessed with beating each other. And in the end, due to their obsessive rivalry, they end up in last place. Because they got so distracted, they neither win or feel the satisfaction of beating each other. But it helps them to learn the episode's moral. Competition isn't a bad thing, but you shouldn't get distracted or obsessed with it. If you're only playing to win, then you're not really having fun. What really makes competition fun is knowing that in the end, you still had fun with your friends and rivals. What helped to make this lesson work is that we do see how competitive AJ and Dash were and why this was something they needed to learn. But it's also done without their competitive spirit feeling out of place. They never went to any extremes that got anyone hurt, and it was done in a way that supported the message the episode was teaching. It was an episode that really made people like the competitive spirit between AJ and Dash, as it added a new dynamic to their friendship that was sensible, fun to watch, offered some insight on the characters, and also made for a good lesson. Now compare that to Non-Compete Clause, where AJ and Dash get obsessed with competition again, but this time they're supposed to be teachers at a school. The main problem with this setup is that their competitive rivalry doesn't appropriately fit the scenario that they're placed in. They're competing to win a Teacher of the Month award, one that doesn't really hold any significance to either one of them, and the award has no personal connection to either one of them, and they're just competing for the sake of competing. The rivalry doesn't even play out in a way that supports the message, and the friendly rivalry doesn't feel friendly at all. The two come across as really bitter, childish, and overbearing throughout the entire experience, sucking out all the fun that's supposed to be part of their rivalry. And it wouldn't have been so bad except for how irresponsibly they end up being characterized in this episode. Not only do they endanger themselves throughout the situation, but they end up endangering the students as well. They don't care about their safety, take the time to think about how their bickering is affecting them, and have all their attention placed on beating each other instead of properly watching over them. And as a result, AJ and Dash feel really out of character in this episode. AJ is completely drained of her sense of responsibility, and Dash's usual filters for keeping her ego in check are non-existent. She actively ignores a question regarding a safety hazard and is more concerned for a record that she just made up in her mind. And the worst part about all this is that AJ and Dash learn absolutely nothing. They didn't learn anything from all the ways they endangered themselves and the others, or even how the students stuck up for them despite almost getting Yona killed. The last shot of the episode is literally them arguing after all the experiences they went through that day. This is one of the worst endings of the entire show because the main characters don't grow from this experience on any level whatsoever. It's not even done in a clever way like in Super Squeezy Cider 6000, where it satirically mocks the idea of how each episode should end with a moral. It just takes AJ and Dash arguing and just leaves it there after it got old within the first 6 minutes. Now for what it's worth, I did find myself somewhat enjoying the episode because it did give the Student 6 a chance to shine. But that doesn't mean I can't deny the way AJ and Dash were handled in this episode was absolutely abysmal. And the main reason why they're so abysmal here is that if you look at these two episodes back to back, the AJ and Dash from Fall Weather Friends and the AJ and Dash from Non-Complete Clause are not the same characters. At this point in the series, they've been through 8 seasons of development in which they've grown and matured. They should already know better than to get so painfully distracted by their competitive spirit at the expense of the students' safety. Even if you were to put continuity aside, it still wouldn't feel like Applejack and Rainbow Dash. AJ is defined by her sense of responsibility and maturity amongst the other characters, and as ego-driven as Dash is, she recognizes when to stop. Neither of these things were present in the episode, and I think it's mostly because the person who wrote the episode, Kim Bayer-Johnson, is a completely new writer to the show. This is the first and only episode they've ever written, and it doesn't feel like they've seen previous episodes involving AJ and Dash together to properly portray their rivalry. It's like they wanted to recapture the spirit of Fall Weather Friends but didn't have an understanding of what made that episode fun. And that was just one example. Because these new writers are so inexperienced with what's come before, there's so many moments of inconsistency that just leave you confused and unsatisfied, including the different ways the characters are handled. Non-Compete Clause was a really bad example of how AJ and Dash can be portrayed if handled badly. And it doesn't stop there. Basically, every member of the main cast ends up getting portrayed badly on multiple occasions. In Marks Forever, Twilight is unreasonably cruel to the CMC, assuming they wanted to sabotage the school school and bans them before they can even offer an explanation. In Friendship University, she becomes highly suspicious of the F-Bros without obtaining proper evidence that they're doing anything illegal. In Fake It Till You Make It, Fluttershy allows her multiple personalities to get out of control, nearly destroying Rarity's business in the city. And because of how she words her apology, it's very likely that she was completely conscious of her actions and was purposefully bullying her raccoon companions and ruining her friend's business. In Sounds of Silence, she believes that the solution to the Kirin problem is to leave things exactly how they are, which literally makes no sense. The Kirin outlawed speech before their butts started glowing, so Fluttershy's solution wouldn't change anything. And yet she insists that her view is right in spite of how obviously asinine it is. In Road to Friendship, Starlight goes full-on bitch mode as she deliberately sells Trixie's carriage that she spent a whole portion of the episode explaining how it means so much to her. She shows no empathy, remorse, or any sense of guilt for what she did to the pony who's supposed to be her closest friend. That's not just cruel, that's downright heartless. In the Maud couple, Pinkie spends the entire episode needlessly complaining about Maud's boyfriend when she has no reason to complain about him. Pinkie should be happy that her sister has someone she can relate to in a romantic sense, and instead she spends the entire episode acting like that stereotypical dad character who gets anal over the idea of their daughter having a date. And don't even get me started on yakety sax. I've said more than enough of what I felt about it already. The way the main characters were handled in certain episodes were so out of sync with what we've seen before that their personalities were outright unrecognizable. Would you really believe for a second that the Pinkie from Yakety Sax is the same Pinkie from Pinkie Pride or Griffin the Brush Off? And aside from the characters themselves, it feels like some of their motivations have been changed as well, without the motivation changes making any sense. The CMC, who are known for their desire to help others find their place in the world, are now trying to get into Twilight's school for no reason really. They just hear about how much fun it's supposed to be, and then their arcs about helping others find their talents is completely dropped. In Yakety Sax, Pinkie gives up on everyone and everything she's ever believed in simply because she was told that she's not good at playing an instrument. The character who was defined by her desire to make others happy, to spread positivity into their lives, all of it gone because she now values some random instrument over everything else. An instrument that is being introduced to the audience in this very episode, and the episode itself never takes the time to show you why it suddenly means so much to her. Just some kind of explanation like it was her last gift from a friend before they passed away. Probably the biggest offender is what happens to Discord in Manner of Principles. In the episode, Twilight leaves Starlight in charge of the school when she and the others are called on a friendship mission. After they leave, Discord shows up and starts talking about how he was never informed about stuff going on at the school and thinks that he can run it while Twilight is away. But when Starlight explains how she's going to do things Twilight's way, you know, because it's her school, he starts to act really aggressive. I mean, at first it wasn't so bad because all he was doing was mildly messing around with Twilight's list, but it gets worse really fast. He hires irresponsible teachers who prove to be a bad influence on the students. He endangers their lives with dragon sneeze trees, Ursa Majors, and bugbears. He gloats about destroying Twilight's trust in Starlight. He hypocritically calls out Starlight for being power hungry when he's trying to force his ways onto the school. He continues to endanger the students even after getting banished from the school, and after all that, we find out that the friendship mission that the main six were sent on was just made up by Discord. And we're also told that the path he set them on was endangering their lives too, including Fluttershy's. Just to clarify, Discord endangered Fluttershy, as in the pony that he said, in his own words, was his best friend. The friend that he was willing to risk his life for by facing Chrysalis. Just saying that completely breaks all continuity with this character. And he did all this because he was upset that Twilight chose Starlight and not him to watch over the school. And that's the problem. Why does Discord suddenly care so much about the school? What would he gain from being in it? What does it have to offer him? When did he ever show any interest in being a teacher or a principal or a figure of education of any sort? Discord is a figure of chaos. His very existence relies on disorder and mayhem. If he doesn't live by those two things, he will literally die. The last place he's going to fit into is a fucking school. He literally has no reason to want to be involved with it so much. And the episode actively goes against character development that he received just 5 episodes earlier. In the breakup breakdown, he learns about how acting on his first instinct isn't always a good thing to do when he sees how it ends up hurting Big Mac in the process. He never personally considered romance before and thought it was something Big Mac didn't need and that he was basing too much of his happiness on Sugar Belle. But he comes to understand that romance is part of building a relationship with people and helps the two get back together. He unintentionally hurt his friend to prove a misguided point, and he puts forth an effort to correct that mistake. He learned a lesson through actively trolling people, and it was layered in nuance instead of the lesson just winging itself. But here, he's purely acting on instinct as an act of spite because he suddenly cares about the school despite having no reason to care about the school. It feels like they made up these new motivations because they're running out of things for the characters to do, and they did it regardless of how much sense it would make. And it kind of feels like they made a theme out of it because the quality of the episodes was largely inconsistent. Like, probably the most inconsistent the series has had so far. For every good episode we got this season, we also got a really bad one. Some of them being downright insufferable, and a lot of the episodes in between were either basic and generic or mediocre and forgettable. And some of the ideas for episodes just feel so out of left field that you end up wondering where they even came from. Like Friendship University, where we're supposed to believe the F-Bros would try to scam people through the school system. It doesn't fit the kind of scamming they would normally do, and when you think about it, it doesn't even make any sense. The university had to have some kind of construction behind it, and it was literally stationed in Las Pegasus. So why are Twilight and Rarity only now finding out about the university when it's already all set up? I'm not kidding. They got the books, the uniforms, the costumes, the schedule plan, the electricity, and the funding for all of it. There is no way that they weren't able to find out about this school until they randomly received some flyers for it. There's also the Mean Six, which while having an interesting concept, ends up getting wasted due to its boring execution. Chrysalis creates an evil version of the Main Six to take the elements of Harmony, only to have them go running off, and we get the usual mistaken identity hijinks without anything really interesting being done with them. Then there's Father Knows Beast that wastes its concept on a comedy episode where the comedy fails to be funny. Not to mention that you're basically watching Spike being emotionally manipulated, which is really uncomfortable to watch. And finally there's School Race, which is a really stupid episode. From the continuity errors to the obvious plot holes to the confusing additions to its magic system to its rushed resolution, it's a really hot mess. The quality of the episodes was so inconsistent that it just began to wear me down. They took one step forward, then 2 steps back, and at the worst of times they backed up the car at 60 miles an hour. If the quality of the episodes was consistent, then they were consistent in not having a lot of lasting power. And then you have what I personally think is the most pointless addition to the entire series, Chancellor Neisei. Now, Neisei was introduced as the antithesis to Twilight's belief that friendship can be shared amongst all creatures and not just ponies. With Equestria becoming more familiar with the outside world, it would make sense that the idea of uniting with other creatures would be questionable to some ponies. Neisei might have been used as a means to explore the outside world from a less optimistic point of view, tackling prejudice in a way that was similar to Zootopia. There's actually some really reasonable potential behind it. And what do they do with it? They make him into a racist grandpa. No, seriously, that's his entire character. He doesn't trust the other creatures, he thinks that ponies are better, he doesn't like the idea of Twilight allowing the other creatures to attend her school, he's simply there just to be a dick to non-ponies. And they do it without having any of his prejudice make any sense. I mean, he was right about Twilight and the others being unqualified teachers, but on the other hand, he has no reason to be so uptight about the other races. Or at least he doesn't bother to explain why. I mean, we have seen in the past seasons how the other creatures have difficulties getting along with ponies. The changelings tried to sap everyone of their life energy, the griffins are selfish dicks, the hippogriffs are cowards, the yaks are uncivilized brutes, and the dragons have very strong temper and trust issues. But Neisei never brings any of these things up, and his judgment towards the other creatures is based on assumptions. He doesn't do anything to explain his prejudice and just stands around shouting his prejudice at people. And what makes it even worse is that it actively provokes the other creatures to the point that it nearly starts a conflict between them. His racism ended up doing the exact opposite of what he was setting out to do. And at the end of School Race, all of his racism is just gone. Like, it completely goes away. And after that happens, you start to realize that there's absolutely nothing else to this character, which ends up exposing the core issue with him. Chancellor Neisei is a pure straw character. A character who exists in the story just to be proven wrong about something. This season is about other creatures getting familiar with Equestria, and he doesn't like it, so we have to show him how wrong he is for not liking it. He has no personality once he changes his mind on the subject, and his actions have virtually no influence on the overall plot. Neisei is completely pointless because he does nothing to contribute to the storyline. Really think about it. In School Days, Friendship U, and School Rays, you could easily cut him out of these episodes and you would lose nothing. They don't even confront his racism in a logical way, like bringing up all the times Equestria was threatened by a homegrown terrorist. One of them was their ruler, for God's sake. Chancellor Neisei never makes an actual argument for his beliefs, and those beliefs just disappear as if they were never there to begin with. And as a result, he spends nearly all of his screen time overreacting to something that isn't even a problem. He is a painfully boring character who contributes nothing to the series, to the point where it would honestly be better if he just wasn't in there at all. But there's still two more things that I want to go over. Firstly is how the School of Friendship ends up being a completely wasted concept. At first I was willing to give it a chance until I started asking myself by the end of the season, what did they even do with it? The entirety of School Days is spent building this thing up and explaining how it'll contribute to the growth of the setting and the characters, and offers a bunch of potential for new story ideas. It was introduced as a big change to the show's dynamic, a bridge for establishing new aspects of the world and the cast, and then they just leave it there. In spite of the school being the supposed core of Season 8, I completely forgot that it was even a thing in some episodes because of how little focus they put on it. Because more time is spent on hijinks involving the main six, Starlight, the CMC, and Spike, the school doesn't get the proper amount of establishment that it clearly needed in order to make its existence feel justified. There are so many episodes in Season 8 where the school is just something going on in the background, and even episodes where the school isn't present at all. They introduce this big game changer, spend a lot of time talking about how important it is, and then we don't even get to see it. Outside of episodes that are used to set up the events for School Rays, the school ends up being just a thing that happened, and they occasionally remind you that it's there without it actually meaning anything. What makes it so frustrating is that writing episodes about the students doing something at the school is really not that hard. The possibilities were very present and you could have easily done something with them. Make them about the students, have the main six and Spike act as mentors to them. Have an episode about them going on a field trip and exploring Equestria and learning things about their culture. Even just an episode about trying to find teachers for this school. More teachers besides just the main six. Because there's a lot of unfortunate implications behind just making the main six and Starlight the only people running the school. By having only 7 teachers doing anything in a school this big with this many students, the School of Friendship is suspiciously understaffed. A Matter of Principles literally opens with AJ saying how there will be no one to run the school if all 6 of them were to go on the mission. Why are the main 6 and Starlight the only teachers there? And how do they even qualify as teachers? And how would they find time to educate all these students while working in their other occupations? Why is there only 7 teachers when there's this many students at the school? It would be one thing if Twilight actually got some other teachers to work there, but we never even see this at any point. The only thing that comes close to them hiring new teachers was in Matter of Principles. And that was done by Starlight in Discord instead of Twilight when Twilight is supposed to be in charge of things. And even then, these teacher scenes with Trixie, Spitfire, Iron Will, and Maud are done as a gag and they never show up again. It got so bad that in School Race, Starlight was the only person looking over the school when the main 6 and Spike were gone, until she ends up disappearing, at which point Cozy Glow, a literal child, is placed in charge of the facility. There was literally no other authority figure Starlight's age, which leaves Neisei thinking that a child was left in charge. Seriously, why the hell are there no other teachers at this school? Why is it so horribly understaffed? It literally makes no sense. They introduce a school welcoming foreign exchange students and spend a lot of time making it sound like it's essential to the story. But after setting it up, they don't give it enough attention. It's understaffed, it doesn't have nearly enough episodes focusing on it, and even episodes where it appears have their focus placed on something that is completely unrelated to what's happening at the school. The School of Friendship, because of this neglect, ends up amounting to a completely wasted concept. It had all of this potential behind it, and it ends up getting squandered, which is highly disappointing. And finally, I think it's time to go over what was personally the biggest disappointment to me. The underuse of the Student 6. They introduce these new characters and almost nothing is really done with them. They were brought in specifically for this season as supporting characters, but the attention given to them is so minimal that they end up feeling like background characters. Now at first glance, I can sort of see why people wouldn't think too much about them because they can come across as a diet main 6. But after taking some time to think about it, they do have some unique things about them. They're a circle of misfits trying to get along in spite of being different species, and in the few instances where they're allowed to do something, they actually show a lot of potential. For example, Yona starts off pretty prideful as a yak. She has the usual stick of thinking yaks are best at everything and doesn't think that there's a reason for her to be there. But as she learns about other cultures while hanging out with a vastly different circle of friends, she starts to feel enlightened about the outside world. Instead of just obsessing over yak stuff, she allows herself to grow accustomed to the ways of others. And as a result, she quickly becomes a lot more civilized compared to other members of her community. There's even times where we get to learn about her individually in ways that don't rely on her working off the other students. She has arachnophobia, a fairly common phobia, that she overcomes not by violent means, but just by lowering her guard and leaving them to be, not allowing herself to feel threatened by them. It's a little similar to how some people deal with arachnophobia by watching Lucas the Spider, seeing something creepy from another perspective instead of just associating it with a status of small deadly insect. Instead of squashing the spider, she tries befriending it, taking the time to see how not all spiders are threatening and dangerous. She gives the spiders a chance, showing how in spite of being a big, strong, prideful yak, Yona is actually really innocent and kind-hearted. It's a trait that fits very well with her clumsiness and naive nature, adding charm to her personality without any of it feeling stale. She's just so precious and adorable, and having a non-pony character giving us a broader range of personalities than usual in a show like this, it's actually some pretty smart writing. And in the episode's heartwarming club Father No Speaks Meltdown and What Lies Beneath, we actually get to see the other students being established as more than just a diet main six, adding something unique and interesting to each of them. Gallus using a tough guy persona as a facade to hide his fears and loneliness, and finding a second chance with his newfound family that was never possible for him in Griffinstone. Ocella's dealing with her insecurities as a member of the community that would be feared due to the Changeling's past. Silverstream facing PTSD after being forced into hiding from a power-hungry tyrant. Smolder setting a great example for dragons by being a figure of guidance for Spike, and not just being a brute with a short temper. Sandbar confronting his idols and representing the loyalty that bounds their friendship together. This was the kind of storytelling and character growth that Season 8 needed so much more of. Just make it about the Student 6 learning about the outside world and learning more about themselves. Maybe even have the main six and Spike act as mentors to them. At this point in the series, they really can't do anything to further develop Twilight, Pinkie, Fluttershy, Rarity, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash because their character arcs are practically all done. They're exactly where they want to be in life, they've already grown to their fullest with 7 seasons of experience, they've protected the world from multiple forces of evil, and now they can just pass down what they've learned to a new generation of youth, which could also work as a metaphor for passing down people's experience with the show and the Brony fandom to a new generation of fans. But instead of doing something like that, it's just more of the main six doing stuff that they've kind of already done before. Why do we need another episode about AJ and Dash being competitive? Why do we need another episode about Pinkie pressuring herself onto Maud? Why do we need another episode about Spike dealing with his dragon heritage? Why do you need any of that when you have so many stories to tell with these guys? As a highly diverse group of misfits, they could have easily worked as a really good vehicle for talking about prejudice and getting along with others different from yourself. It's almost as if some of the best moments of the season were the ones that weren't so focused on the main ponies. Instead, just watching these kids hanging out and building a relationship with each other in a show that's entirely about building relationships. I was never planning on being so harsh on Season 8 because it had some nice potential going in, but when you put it all together, the way that it came out, it's just not satisfying compared to other seasons. The inconsistent episode quality, the botching of the main characters, the boringly slow pace, the foaming in of naysay for the sake of cheap drama, the focus being placed on all the wrong things, the wasted potential, the drastic changes within the staff and the writing team. I mean, what does it really say about the situation when a 40-minute holiday special that aired off-season ended up being a lot more fun and entertaining than a lot of stuff that happened in Season 8? The only consistently good thing about it was the Student 6, and they ended up getting pushed to the back of the bus to the point that at one instance, they weren't even allowed to be the focus of their own episode. If the crew doesn't shape up soon and get a better idea of how to write good stories for this series, then Season 9 is in big trouble. And Season 9 shouldn't be in big trouble. If it is going to be the final season of the show, it needs to be the perfect send-off. The perfect piece of closure after everything that's happened over the years. I want people to remember MLP for all of its great storytelling and for all the ways that it brought people together and inspired them to make great fan work. Not because it ended up going bad at the last minute. In some ways it could have something to do with franchise fatigue because Hasbro wants to give us too much of a good thing, but even then it shouldn't get in the way of good writing. And I would really appreciate it if the team took the time to think about what went wrong in Season 8 so that Season 9 can be better. Maybe I'm just being too hopeful or too optimistic, but I guess only time will tell. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to get ready before Kingdom Hearts 3 completely takes over my life. This is Map, signing out.